Good morning, Arabile, and good morning to you, Eldred. As the heavens prepare to open here, I'm sure we'll only be lucky enough to have one more outside broadcast before we move under shelter. The evidence also, just an outpouring of which we saw last week at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry, both by Jabulani Mapiyeye, who is the suspended EMPD chief, and Deputy EMPD Chief Revo Spies, who is back in the commission this morning to give evidence. And together we saw, through their testimony, this takeover of the Metro Police Department in Ekurhuleni. Revo Spies was detailing how suspended acting EMPD chief, this is Julius Mkhwanazi, had illegally registered and fitted out those blue lights belonging to the companies owned by Vusumusi Cat Matlala. And what Spies is going to go into a bit more detail about today is the alleged crimes that were committed by an EMPD sub-team. They were known as the SWAT team, and they were led by Mkhwanazi. And the accusation is serious, Eldred. They're accused of 6 cases, including murder, kidnapping, hijacking, and extortion. These are cases EMPD is also looking at. And when you think of that against the backdrop of this broader theme around the capture of our law enforcement complex, this gives us some of that visceral detail, Eldred, as to how these things allegedly take root and are carried out. Good morning to you, and just share with us your thoughts on that aspect of testimony.
Good morning again, Iman. And it's fitting that the heavens will open up over Swanee, and it's been doing so since the start of the testimony by the Metro Police, because what we are seeing is an erosion of the essential role of the Metropolitan Police. And let me just quickly reflect for 30 seconds on their role. Their role is to ensure that we have a regulated and compliant society that upholds the law, society that abides by provisions and authorities rendered through permits and licensing to ensure that the society is regulated, it's compliant and taxed, and that the state has a basically control or handle on business and activities within the metropole. What is the need for a SWAT or a drug busting or a vice squad within Metro? There is none, because and it's simply because we haven't defined their role more clearly than what is stated in the legislation, and specifically, we haven't helped them understand what is their role at preventing crime and lawlessness and to ensuring that we're all safe. So when we have a capability within a under-regulated, weak leadership institution like some of the metros, then of course you have a capability that can be exploited by those with nefarious intent. And what we heard from the suspended the Metro chief and the former deputy Metro chief Spies is the fact that this capability has indeed, to their mind, been taken over by criminals, essentially.
And I mean, he likened it to, Mapiyeye did, to a mafia outfit more than it was a police team. And I mentioned already some of the criminal cases associated with them that EMPD is looking into. That combined with, and we reflected on this last week, Eldred, the ability of civilian outfits or businesses to be able to be kitted out with blue lights, and this was all done illegally, Mapiyeye said, again erodes public trust in these institutions that we have to trust. Listening to, and you heard the commission, the judge last week ask whether if, you're pulled over in a roadblock, can the officers ask you to pay your outstanding fines upon threat of being arrested at those roadblocking scenes. And we got some more clarity there, but we've seen the opposite happening when we go through roadblocks. You are demanded that payment right there and then at the scene. And then there are other allegations, of course, around corruption of, driving around with people and getting them to withdraw money out of their bank accounts and being able to pay. So there's definitely a perforation of trust between us and them. This can't help that cause.
Absolutely not. And it's maybe time that we as South Africans understand the fact that the Metro Police, in terms of proximity, are probably the closest to us. They are visible in our lives every day, and they infringe on activities that we undertake every day. We drive somewhere, we go to a shop where we buy goods and services, and we move around the city. And the people we're likely to encounter and ask us questions to ensure, as I said earlier, that we are compliant and that the society is regulated and that we uphold the laws, likely to the Metro Police. Now, when you extend that to include the security industry, people who are not properly trained, properly vetted, and or properly mandated to ask questions of us, then we have a blurring of the lines, a very dangerous blurring of the lines. When we take a step further and we provide them with the regalia and the tools of trade that should only be to those who have been duly authorized, duly vetted, trained and capacitated with state resources to undertake a function lawfully, then we are actually setting ourselves up for this mafia state that everybody talks about. Because the first instinct of a citizen being confronted with somebody in uniform is not necessarily to question their bona fides or to ask for their appointment card or their certification, is to comply and to avoid arrest and the inconvenience of going through that whole process and not likely to be hurt. You are likely to actually, if they say to you, can pay your fine right here on the spot in cash, you are likely to do so. Whereas there's no provision for people to pay cash fines on the spot. They give you a ticket and you go pay it somewhere else and you get proof of the fact that you paid it. So this blurring of the lines between, and it's all done in this idea of force multiplier. And that's a discussion that we do have to have, because that's not what force multiplier mean. It doesn't means making your gang bigger than mine. So we have this blurring of the lines that has provided the fertile ground for this criminal mafia to infiltrate and to basically ensure that they use the capability of a Metro Police service to their own nefarious ends, Iman.
And one of the comments you've been making since the very beginning is for South Africans not to be disheartened by what we're hearing here in terms of the allegations of just how rooted outside and powerful business interests have been in abusing state apparatus, in abusing systems that taxpayers are actually bankrolling, but really to have an education as to how these things work and how we can demand accountability, not only from IPID, but from our police departments and from our Metro Police departments. Because I want you to pick up on that theme of force multiplier and just explain what that means for us, while at the same time understanding that it is important for us, even though this might be disheartening to hear, it gives us some insight as to how we can be more active citizens.
Absolutely. And what we've seen and what we've been hearing, Iman, points to the fact that the public and political governance of both the South African Police Service, apparently the judiciary, and now the Metropolitan Police Services are as weak, essentially, or maybe even absent in some instances. This demand that we combat crime, and remember, that's not the orientation of the South African Police Service. It's supposed to be the prevention of crime first, and then the investigation of crime based on evidence, seeking prosecution of people. It's not to go out there and go to war with the citizens or to go to war with crime. So this pressure to deal with crime has meant that the South African Police Service has basically said we cannot do it alone. So what we need to do is go find partners to do so. So yes, the partner given to them to ensure compliance and regulation is the Metro Police, and to do activities to prevent crime and to ensure public safety, that's Metro Police. That's an essential role, Iman. It's not a limited role. We have to lose this narrative that they have a limited role. So I want to put that to bed today. That activity where you say, I'm responsible for traffic, I'm responsible for ensuring that Spaza Shops has a health certificate, I'm responsible for ensuring that somebody undertaking a business is doing so to ensure labor rights and public and their health and safety on site. That's an essential role. That role has to be undertaken together with standard law enforcement practices as undertaken by the South African Police and, to a limited extent, Metro Police. It's not that Metro Police then starts taking over the duties and filling the gaps of the South African Police Service, because that's what they mean by force multiplier. That's not it. Force multiplier in simple terms means you do everything that you do to the best of your ability to fulfill your mandate. I will do mine, and together that has a greater impact on ensuring that we deal with crime and criminality and public violence, and that we ensure public safety. So we need to turn that definition around from just ensuring that our gang is big enough to take on the other gang and that we're all doing the same thing. It's all of us doing what we are mandated to do, the best of our ability with the necessary resources. And if we do that collectively, our collective effort will have a greater impact, Iman.
Eldred de Klerk, your words have impact this morning. Thanks for breaking that down for us and connecting things too at the same time. Appreciate your analysis this morning. A touch after 7:30, it is time for another look at our top stories at this hour.